So why might we want to do monitoring and evaluation in SUMPS? Well, first of all, we have to understand what monitoring and evaluation are. So monitoring is gathering data to find out how things are changing while we've implemented our SUMP, and evaluation is trying to find out whether or not they happened because of what we did in our SUMP or because of other things that might have happened. So how do we go about? Well, what are the things that we might want to monitor in our SUMP? My first and most important message is we don't want to monitor too much. We don't want to have too much data. Sometimes people feel that they need to have lots and lots and lots of data for their SUMP. You don't have to have so much. The first SUMPs that were set up in Britain in the late 1990s and early 2000s, they maybe only had 10 or 20 indicators. So we don't need hundreds and hundreds of indicators like I've seen in some SUMPs more recently. Even if you gather a little bit of data, chances are you're gathering much more than you ever gathered before. But what kind of things might we want to monitor? Well, really, it has to relate to what we're trying to achieve with our SUMP. So if our SUMP is about improving quality of life, well, we might want to measure, are people really feeling that their city is getting or becoming a better place to live? So the objective, better quality of life. The indicator, do people feel that it is a better place to live? A simpler one might be road safety. A classic objective, a very typical objective within SUMPs is to have better road safety. So obviously we need to gather some data to see whether or not our roads are getting safer. So that's another basic message, that the indicators, the data that you gather to monitor what's happening during your SUMP as a result of your SUMP, that data relates to the objectives that you want your SUMP to achieve. So another important aspect of monitoring, not only should you gather the data, not too much data, and you only need to gather data that's related to what you're trying to achieve, but when things are getting better, you need to tell people that things are getting better. You need to communicate that good news. So there's a clear link between monitoring and communication and stakeholder involvement in your SUMP. A very, very good example of this is the city of Copenhagen. They do have a lot of resources, but one of their key activities in their SUMP is improving things for cyclists, and they produce a very attractive publication every year or two which shows how things have got better for cyclists, how much safer it is, how much safer cyclists feel, how much cyclists contribute to the economy. These types of statistics that they gather, and they're using the monitoring data to sell the success of their SUMP. So when you've got some good news from your SUMP, even good news like we managed to implement we planned to implement 30 kilometres of new bike lane, and we did implement 30 kilometres of new bike lane, you need to sell that good news so that people know that you're doing good things. It's important to monitor not only what's changing in people's behaviour, or the number of cyclists, the number of bus passengers, or the amount of air pollution that there is, but also it's important to monitor what you've, as a city, actually managed to achieve. So for example, how much have you managed to build, how much new cycle lane is there, how much new traffic calming is there, this type of thing. And also, if there are some good news stories about how efficient you've been in your transport system, then also tell people about that. If your bus company covers 90% of its costs from its fares, that's something to be very proud of. If you've delivered a project at 10% under the planned budget, that's another thing to be very proud of. Tell people about it, use that good news story in media, in social media, and then people will believe in your SUMP, and that helps you to build further political support for your SUMP. So there are political reasons as well as technical reasons for gathering, monitoring data. But remember, never too much monitoring data. Linked to monitoring and evaluation within SUMPs is the subject of modelling. of building a transport model for your city. And sometimes, often in fact, I've seen a situation where cities feel that they can't advance in their SUMP until they've built a fully working, 4-stage, multimodal transport model. Models can be useful. They can be useful especially in selecting between 2 or 3 similar options. So let's say, for example, that there's a part of the city and you know that as part of your SUMP in that part of the city you need to improve public transport, or you want to improve public transport. How do you choose exactly what kind of public transport scheme you should install or build in that part of the city? You could build a bus rapid transit, you could build a tram, you could build a metro. In that kind of situation, a transport model can be very useful in helping you to compare what the benefits of those different types of public transport option should be. But a transport model for the whole city will not allow you or help you to choose different SUMP measures for the whole city. You have to choose those measures from other broader sources of information and from discussion within your city. So there's a wide range, a wide package of measures that you can have in an SUMP, and some of those can be modelled and some of those can't be modelled very well. So for example, installing new dropped curbs or accessible transport for disabled people, you can't use a model to assess the benefits of that. You can use a model to choose between maybe 2 different forms of public transport on the same corridor. The model can't choose the measures for you. You have to discuss with your colleagues, with your stakeholders, maybe with some experts as well, what types of measure might be useful, might be applicable in different parts of your city or in a package for your whole city. Those cities that have been successful in their SUMPs have tended across the city to apply a relatively similar package of measures, and a lot of these cities did that without any transport modelling, or with very limited transport modelling. And those measures are slowing traffic down, slowing motor vehicle traffic down to make roads safer, moving space from motor vehicles to public transport, walking and cycling, managing parking, introducing park and ride, and improving public transport to make it faster. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they built rail systems or a metro system. They may just have improved their bus system. Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain is a very good example of that. So as I said, the cities that have been successful with their SUMPs have tended to introduce this similar package of measures, restraining car use with parking and speed management, sometimes closing roads, pedestrianisation in the city centre, park and ride, improved public transport, and more space for cycling, walking and public transport. That's been a common package, and many cities that have introduced that have not modelled their entire transport system. They've not even modelled, in some cases, part of their transport system. The model maybe came in later, but they adopted their package of measures very early on through discussion with their stakeholders and through simple evaluation and political choices. So the message is, you do not have to have a full, complicated transport model of your whole city before you can start making decisions about what types of measures you want to implement within your SUMP. Transport models are very good and have been designed to evaluate choices between quite similar large-scale transport infrastructure investments, metros, roads, trams, this type of thing. An SUMP might include one line of new tram or one improved bus line, but it includes lots and lots of other smaller, softer measures, but measures implemented right across your city that maybe on their own have a small effect, but together have a very large effect on people's behaviour because they're implemented across the city. If you rely on a transport model to help you to select measures, or even as your main way of selecting measures, then it will inevitably steer you towards the types of measures that transport models are good at evaluating and appraising, and that's the big capital intensive, infrastructure intensive investments. They have their place in SUMP, but SUMP is far more than just infrastructure. So if you want a proper SUMP, a good SUMP in your city, use the transport model, if you have one, as it'll help the decision making. It doesn't replace decision making. And if you don't have a full transport model, that doesn't mean that you can't start working on your SUMP and do lots of really good things without it. One of the things that comes up a lot in discussions in SUMPs is obviously how you're going to use the limited road space that you have, especially in central and inner parts of your city. You've got to make choices between public transport, between giving space to parking, to cycling, to walking, to private motor vehicles. And if you want an SUMP that's genuinely an SUMP, chances are you're going to have to shift some of that space away from parked cars and away from moving cars towards public transport, cycling and walking. If you rely on a transport model to make those decisions, your transport model will usually tell you that those decisions are bad decisions, because in the short term the model will show you that they're going to slow cars down, and the model will tell you that that is a bad thing. I think we need to take a step back and look at what models have predicted, whether that's come true, and we also have to look at those places that have removed road space and whether the nightmare that the model predicted has actually come true. So if we take one example, city of Ljubljana, which converted one lane in each direction on one of its main arterial streets into bus lane, coming into town and going out of town. So it gave space from private cars to buses. Much modelling was done about that, and the modelling predicted that it would be a total disaster. In fact, the scheme was implemented and it operated fine. Why is that? Because the model doesn't predict very well how people respond to those reductions in road space. Another example, the city of Krakow in Poland has a ring road, an inner ring road. It's very recently taken a lot of traffic out of that ring road by making it one way for private cars, two-way for public transport and cyclists. It's turned the public space, or changed the public space completely. Again, disaster was predicted, but in fact disaster didn't occur. People are travelling into the centre of Krakow still, but they're travelling by different modes of transport, or they're travelling at different times, because there's less capacity for private cars on this inner ring road. On the other hand, there's increased capacity for public transport. So models, even if you have one, and they can be very expensive and they can take years to build, and then only a few people end up knowing how to use them. The models, even if you have one, don't always make the right prediction, because they're not as sophisticated as maybe you might imagine, or the people who build them tell you that they are. Key messages that I want to give, essentially in relation to monitoring: do some monitoring, make the monitoring relate to your objectives, but keep the monitoring simple. Don't spend lots and lots of time gathering lots and lots of data. What types of measures do successful cities, the successful SUMPs, what do they implement? They implement some restraint for private car, parking restraint, reduction of road space, giving that road space to public transport, cycling and walking. And in terms of modelling, use the model as a tool in a limited way when you're making choices between different options in the same corridor, very similar options, but don't use the model as a substitute for decision making. The package of measures that you need to choose for your SUMP has to come from discussion with your colleagues, your stakeholders, your politicians and your people. It's not going to come from the model.